I don't know, we'll see how it goes, see if you enjoy it. But yeah, I'll go do my nails now and relax. Happy tingles. Okay, so here's the mind map I made. I did it on Xmind. So yeah, just going through what I wrote. So let's start by defining life. So life typically has a few different characteristics. So it grows, replicates, metabolizes, as a system for storing information like DNA, and it evolves. Or it was described by a scientist, NASA scientist Gerald Joyce. I quite like this description. So it can be described as a self-sustaining chemical system capable of undergoing Darwinian evolution. However, when you use these characteristics here, this can also describe non-living things as well, so we need to be a bit careful. And it also sort of brings up the question of is, the category of life just a definition made by humans, or is it like sort of a clear distinction between what's dead and what's alive? So for instance, there's like the debate around viruses, which some scientists sort of disagree with are viruses dead or alive? So yeah, it might just be like the way us humans define things rather than set characteristics of whether something's actually dead or alive. Okay, so then they went on to talk about biospace. Which is essentially like which sort of conditions, which sort of space in the environment does life, what do you find life, where does it take up space in the environment? In what sort of conditions do you tend to find life? And we've got certain limits to sort of the conditions that are conducive to life. So we've got pH, which is whether something's like acidic or alkaline. We've got temperature, so you wouldn't find a lot of life in very cold temperatures or very hot temperatures. Got the amount of radiation that's around, how much pressure is around. So if it's a very like high pressure environment or low pressure, you might not find any life. Salinity, so that's how much salt is around, I think. as well. So there are a few basic components of cells. So cells need a membrane so that all the chemical reactions inside them are enclosed. That's in the form of something called a phospholipid bilayer. And oh no, didn't mean to do that. You need some sort of energy system so that there's energy to do reactions and build molecules. And you need an information storage system like DNA. And so it's just saying that there's different energy systems as well. So like there are various different organisms that use energy in different ways. So for example, you've got heterotrophs, which make molecules from organic materials. That's like us, so we're taking food and we use that food to like form molecules in our body. There are phototrophs that mainly use energy from light, and there are chemolithotrophs, which mainly take in energy from rocks. I don't really know how they do that, to be honest. And there's a little bit about origin, so like where could it have started? What do we need, and what are the current theories? So I mean, okay, first of all, I guess, what do we need to make life? So we need an energy source, we need a way of concentrating molecules, and we need an environment that won't destroy these molecules when they're made. So there's current theories about where life would have started. So there's deep sea vents, impact craters, beaches, and volcanic hot springs. And it just makes a point that some of the earliest organisms are heat-loving, so super hot environments would have actually been, quite possibly where life would have formed. And then just a little bit more about where it could have started. So, I mean, there's a few different ways it could have started. So, it could have originated elsewhere first and then arrived on Earth, or it could have originated on Earth. So, I mean, a reason it could have originated elsewhere is because amino acids are literally like found everywhere. So like on loads of meteorites that come into Earth, there are loads of amino acids on them. And they also contain lipids, which is what like cell membranes are formed of. So could very well have originated out of Earth. But the assumption that we make is that